I know that sounds laughable and obvious, but it's not. For example, most staff advisors on education for members of Congress have no particular expertise in that field, or for that matter, any knowledge concerning the major players' invested interests in education. Worse, the position tends to be viewed by them as a stepping stone for political science majors barely out of college onto something a little more exciting. Many such staffers are the sons and daughters of important somebodies in government and are not exactly what you'd call quick studies. The extent of the staffer's knowledge about education is something along the lines of John Dewey being a saint who modernized the schools. Think progressive education, and that the leftist extremist lobbying union, the National Education Association, actually looks out for teachers and kids. By the way, who can tell me, this is a test, I'm an old school teacher so I have to do this, who can tell me what psych war rule that we've gone over the expression progressive education comes under? Yes? What is progressive education? What expression does that, what is that? It's a slogan. Remember? Slogans. And so that helps them. By the way, let's see, most experienced and talented persons should hold these positions on the staff research advisory positions. We should be paying them big bucks, even if it's a low-profile position, because that tells them that it's valued even though it's low profile. Our adversaries, our opponents, have always known this, and that's why they have held the advantage. They pay their staff advisors big bucks. Those skilled in war bring the opponent to the field at battle. They do not allow themselves to be taken or drawn there. Why do we always wind up debating issues on our adversary's turf? When we go to meetings, it's at a time and place of the opposition's choosing. For example, when we debate in a public forum, it's frequently the big three TV networks that get us there. And then guess whose agenda gets the positive coverage? The media hype, of course, is the bait, and we take it. What would happen, for example, if we invited our enviro extremists and smart growth adversaries to debate our side right here today on this turf? They'd just blow us off. Disrupt the opponent's alliances using deceptive operations. Be seen in the west and march out of the east. Lure your enemy to the north and strike in the south. Drive the opposition leaders crazy, and he repeats it again. Bewilder them so that their constituencies disperse in confusion. We've already talked about how the counterculture left drives us crazy with its double standards and hypocrisy. What we haven't discussed is the element of surprise, luring one's enemy to the north and striking in the south. This means using that element of surprise, for example, by appearing to capitulate on some issues when really buying time to snatch a bigger prize. School privatization schemes like charter schools and vouchers, for example, will in the long run inject additional federal dollars into the school systems, along with the leftist strings that no doubt will be attached. But while we're taking this bait, more red tape and bureaucratic nonsense is piled on to the process of launching a private school, thus driving up the prices. In other words, the left throws us a bone to deflect attention from what they're really up to. Numbers alone confer little advantage. Our opposition has been masters of the numbers game, selecting the time and places for confrontation, packing audiences and committees so they can count on their numbers being greater than ours. But, you know, looking around this room, yeah, true, we don't have a lot of people, but, you know, Jesus understood the principle of this principle better than our opposition does. He had only 12 disciples, and they changed the whole world. Avoid the opposition when his spirit is keen, and attack him when it's sluggish. This is control of the morale factor. Why do you suppose most school-related meetings are held in the evenings? And it's probably true of the smart growth and all of the others too. True, most people work during the day, but hey, so do the provocateurs. Remember, provocateurs know you'll be more sluggish in the evenings. So rest up. When a faction's leaders or policies are inconsistent, one can bet that spirits are low and the rank and file angry. When people belonging to the faction continually gather in small groups and whisper, the leaders have lost confidence in their constituents. Isn't this amazing? 500 BC. Our adversaries are ever looking for signs of dissension and confusion in our ranks. So care must be taken to avoid showing inconsistency, because friction receives huge play in the liberal-dominated press and is used against us. Okay, the way in which the mind goes about drawing conclusions is based upon established patterns of logic. This is important if you want to avoid falling victim to thought disruption, which we talked about earlier. Thought disruption is the inability to sustain a line of reasoning from beginning to conclusion. Sometimes the cause is continuous interruptions. The interruptions built into the typical school day have played a huge part in children's inability to concentrate. Later, this is taken for maladies like attention deficit disorder. The only deficit is the one the schools are creating by cutting out the learning time. But there's another cause for thought disruption. Most people argue in such a way as to make their case appear more strong than it really is. Thought disruption distracts the listener, and eventually we may forget what we're even talking about. And that's why I said, remember your position on an issue. Now, this issue comprises a large part of my 5 to 8 hour course. Among the methods of distracting participants in a meeting and or deceptively augmenting one's positions are leaving out part of a quotation, misquoting somebody, dismissing the alternatives, changing the subject, that's a favorite, exaggerating the facts, appealing to popularity, or smearing the opponents. Lay audiences today are not expected to be able to pick up on faulty reasoning as long as it's smuggled in. A fallacy of logic is a deceptive maneuver intended to bolster an argument. There are, of course, many fallacies, and the ones I focus on in my seminars are the ones parents and other citizens are most likely to encounter on a rigged task force or some kind of committee. And these are some of them that you will see. I'm not going to go into each one because we don't have time, but that's the kind of thing that I focus on in the longer. It's in my manual in the back, and I do say quite a bit on it there. But you need to keep in mind that this is the way they bolster an argument many times. I'll give you a chance to look at that for just a second. There are other techniques too, such as the Tavistock and Alinsky techniques, which again I don't have time to go into. Then there's the dead giveaway phrases that should signal you that you're dealing with a professional. They always start something with a particular lead-in, and I list those lead-in phrases that as soon as you hear that, a red flag should go up in your head that you're dealing with a pro. But for now, let's summarize the basics of what I've covered here. Know when you're under attack. If you can't spot verbal aggression when you hear it, you'll be a perfect target. Do not assume you're oversensitive, paranoid, reactionary, narrow, or that you just don't get it. If something doesn't sound right, there's probably a reason. Know what kind of attack is being employed against you, and that goes back to that list that I just gave you. Learn to identify some of the basic structures of fallacious reasoning. Learn to gauge the skill of your adversary and other participants. Make your defense appropriate to the attack. Remember that a stock response is not necessarily the right one to use. Frequently, the best defense is a good offense. I'll say almost always the best defense is a good offense. When targeted, always question the opponent's basic assumptions rather than taking the bait. Nail him right there. And finally, play through, follow through, play to win. Don't feel guilty about fighting back. Political indoctrination or American constitutionalist. UN's international human rights or the U.S.'s inalienable rights. Private property does not lead to tyranny. Government control of property does. You play to win. You keep those thoughts in your mind when you're at these meetings, and remember to follow through on that and never let it go. Thank you very much.